Hi, I'm Julie Ross.
And I'm Gregory Abbey.
And you're listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
Julie is a longtime parent educator and counselor.
And Greg is an actor, writer, and director, and more importantly, a parent just like you.
Through conversations covering a range of different topics, challenges, and roadblocks, we hope to give you a few of Julie's tools that might just help make parenting a little bit easier.
Look, nobody's perfect, and parenting is challenging, to say the least. With a few skills under our belts, though, we might just be able to be good enough parents and enjoy the journey and our children a little bit more in the process.
Hi, it's Greg. I'd like to welcome you to the second part of our conversation with therapist Amy Bernstein as we cover the topic, the dinner table war zone, children and food, and continue our conversation concerning the issues around our kids and food. So if you haven't listened to part one, the previous episode, I recommend you start with that one and then definitely pick up our conversation with this episode. And as always, thanks for listening. What about a child, and this is coming from personal experience, you touched on this a little bit with picky eaters, but I have to believe this is like a popular one out there that people struggle with. So one of my kids, who will remain nameless, has always been super picky. Is one of those kids, this is kind of classic, like a big pasta eater. And we've struggled, and she's older now, and it's still sort of an issue, right? Where she doesn't eat a large variety of foods, and there's a lot of carbs. And so there's that classic thing, which I think a lot of parents struggle with, like, I wish they ate more vegetables, and I wish they ate a little more healthy. And if a parent's in that situation, because we are, and I'm sure a lot of parents are, what do you do in that situation? If you want them to eat in a more healthy, balanced way, but they're literally like, no, I will eat plain pasta with butter only.
I would say, where's the problem?
Oh, meaning what? Like, is that a big deal?
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
How is that a problem? Where's their evidence that is a problem? I mean, that's a question I would be asked. Like, if I was that parent, that's what I would be asking. And I asked, my daughter loves sugar. I think she would just eat cookies and ice cream all day long. So, that pushes all of my buttons. But I have to ask myself, like, is this showing up in any way in her life, in her health?
That's detrimental.
That's a problem right now.
Right.
And it's not. She's a great sleeper. She's she's a very robust kid, like super healthy, athletic, no health issues whatsoever. So I have to check my own, like, sugar is bad, right? And it affects my body differently than it affects her body, right? My relationship with sugar is because of my own experience with sugar and everything that, I hear from the world. But where is the problem? I mean, over the holidays, I met the father of a friend of mine, 92-year-old man who doesn't eat vegetables. And it's like, someone was commenting like, oh, that's not healthy. And someone else said, well, by the time you're 92, not eating vegetables, I think that you get the right to not eat vegetables and say that there's nothing wrong with not eating vegetables. But if there's issues like
hyperactivity or
like acid reflux or sluggishness or I think that if there were problems from that, they would show up.
No, I think that's really clear, and I think it's a great answer. And the answer is, is this an issue? And there might be empirical evidence that says, like, yeah, this is a problem. But it sounds like you're saying, and Julie, I'd be curious to hear your take on a picky eater, whether it's around sugar or carbs, they'll only eat one thing. It sounds like what you're saying is, like, if there's not a problem, there might not be a problem there. I don't know, Julie, what do you think?
I agree 100%. I mean, unless three different opinions who have medical degrees, because there's evidenced by the fact that, not all doctors are created equal, tell you, there's a problem with the blood tests that they run regularly on kids, then you need to look into it. But the thing that I discovered about picky eaters, because I had one hearty eater and one picky eater, is, kind of left to their own devices, they kind of self-regulate over time. because our tendency is to chase them with the vegetables or to chase them with the,
Right.
try this, try this, try this. At least have some cheese on your pasta, whatever it might be. But if we stop that behavior over time, they do become curious about other kinds of foods. I remember so much for my son. This actually occurred. I remember the moment it occurred, the curiosity. We were at the Ninth Avenue Food Festival. So, for people who don't live in New York, they close off a good portion of one of the avenues here and they put food booths out. This is pre COVID. They put food booths out, and all of the restaurants, which some of which are very fine restaurants, have, you can sample their food for a not as much money as you'd pay if you went into the restaurant. So we were at the Ninth Avenue Food Festival, and we came to a French booth where there was a French restaurant, and they were serving frogs' legs, and my son was just horrified by that whole thought. But the vendor said, "I'll tell you what, if you'll try the frog's legs, I'll give them to you for free." Well, their curiosity. So I guess my son was probably 9 at the time, and they were like, free? They knew enough to know that was like something valuable. And they were like, okay. And, that one tasting, they discovered that they really liked that, and that some of their fear around it or hesitancy around that and probably other foods was, unless you tasted it, you didn't have any real evidence that it wasn't going to be good. And sure enough, I mean, they are an incredible eater. They try everything, they cook everything. It's kind of amazing. And we just didn't push, when they went through the white food phase or the blonde food phase or there was never any green food phase until after the frog's legs moment. But I feel like, if you kind of leave kids alone about it, they'll self-regulate. Again, the division of responsibilities, making sure that you prepare a variety of healthy foods and you put them on the table and let them choose what they want.
Well, and Amy, maybe you can speak to this. And there's two things. So it sounds like this is true of a lot of things that Julie and I talk about, is like the harder you push, the further they move away. And also the idea of, and this is kind of a deeper idea of, because I've seen this with my child who has this pasta thing, that it's become kind of a little bit of a joke in extended families and stuff. And ultimately, especially as she's gotten a little older, she just feels bad about herself. It's not funny. To her, it becomes kind of shame. And Amy, can you speak to a little bit about, do you agree with that idea that Julie's talking about? This is the more you push, not only the further they move away, but that intuitively, especially, they get how you feel. They know you've mentioned vegetables 1,000 times. It's like they don't get it. And also the shame that can come around that, because you've talked about, depression, anxiety, that the things that can come from this. So that I just said a whole bunch. So I don't know, share whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think that this is where, right, science is amazing, but it also, right, it's like, how can I say this? Like, everyone needs to eat, there's this idea everyone needs to eat vegetables or they will die an early death. Right. It's sort of like what we carry with us. It's not true. And so, there's so much genetic variation. Mm-hmm. And how I need to eat is not necessarily how my kid needs to eat. It's not necessarily how my husband needs to eat. And right, it's like this. I think that the medical community causes so much harm with weight and shame. It's ultimately shame because there's so many things that can go wrong with our bodies that point to obesity, right? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that everyone who's obese is going to be unhealthy.
Right.
And so, we're quick to say, oh, you need to lose weight or you'll get diabetes or you'll have heart issues, or it's not true. I mean, it's true for some people. It's not true for everyone. And so it's like really, really honoring your genetics, really, because once you start to fight your genetics, It's such an uphill. I mean, you're not gonna succeed in that. And so just like letting your body do what your body's gonna do, which includes eating what it wants to eat. You know, some bodies can be vegan, other bodies can't, like
Right.
cannot. They need meat. You know, some bodies need a lot more carbohydrates than others. You know, on and on and on. Some bodies can't tolerate dairy. Others like eat a lot of dairy. And so just there's so much variation. And just sort of like letting it be. And then as a kid grows up and becomes an adult, and you know, as long as they're having blood work done, like you said, I mean, there are ways in which you can check these things out through blood work. But if nothing is going wrong, then nothing is going wrong.
Exactly.
I did want to ask a little bit more specifically around eating disorders, even though we've kind of covered this already, and I think you've already talked about what we might do, but I wondered if we could delve into it a little more specifically. And you would know more. I mean, the ones that come to mind for me are anorexia or bulimia. And I guess the question is, if you're a parent, what are some of the signs maybe you can look out for that might be going on? Does that question make sense? And if that's the situation and you discover somehow, because sometimes it's hard with teenagers, which is something I want to talk a little bit about. The kids in general can really keep things tucked away. And I don't know a lot about eating disorders, but what I do know is that they can be very secretive and can go on without people being aware of them. So can both of you speak to a little bit about how you as a parent might become aware of that, what you should look out for? And also in the event that you discover there is an eating disorder going on, what do you do? And Amy, do you mind? Do you want to start?
Yeah, no, it's a really big question. And you know, like I said before, I think that you really want to hone in on behaviors, right? So there's eating behaviors, and then there's other behaviors, like are they withdrawing from their friends? Are they isolating? Do they feel more secretive? Which teenagers inherently do. They are more secretive. They do pull away.
Yeah.
But this would have a tone to it that is like more anxious, more depressed, more perfectionistic. You know, are they like preoccupied with food, preoccupied with their weight, preoccupied with their grades?
Can I ask you, have you found in your practice that a parent might send the child to you because of an emotional issue, and then what gets uncovered is that there's an eating disorder going on? Have you had that experience?
I have had that experience. I've had that
Right.
experience with adults as well.
So it's more about tuning into, like you said, maybe emotional behaviors,
Yes.
aside from seeing some literal eating thing that's going on.
Yes. I mean, you know, there's rapid weight loss, rapid weight gain. There can be no weight change, and it could be like a very serious eating disorder as well. And I think getting professional support is, you know, people tend to wait too long to do that. And so it doesn't hurt to see someone or talk to someone if you suspect.
Right.
And oftentimes, eating disorders start with, I always say, with eating disorders, like the body image issues are the first thing to come and the last thing to go in recovery. So just dissatisfaction with their bodies can be a way it begins, right? And then that somehow gets put into action. And it becomes like a project for the kid.
So that might be one of the first signs that a parent would see is attention to, you know, I don't like my body, dissatisfaction with the body, a lot of, you know, standing and looking at oneself in the mirror. I would imagine maybe even trying to follow particular fashion trends, although maybe that less so. But I think that's very accurate, Amy, that it's the first thing to come and the last thing to go. Because when I think through my practice and the parents whose children have had eating disorders, you know, there was always that sign that they were, you know, that sometimes the parents picked up on, sometimes the parents didn't pick up on, but that, it was dissatisfaction with how I look. And that's not to say that everybody who feels dissatisfied with how they look is going to develop
Right.
an eating disorder. I mean,
Right.
that's,
Sure.
that doesn't, that it's
There's
not
such a
equated.
spectrum.
It's such a spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. And it often starts with healthy eating is often how eating disorders can start as well. And we're talking, right, and so I'm talking more about anorexia, bulimia, and then there's binge eating. There's people, kids that exercise. It's like their form
Right.
of purging is through exercise.
Right.
So it takes many forms.
And I think, Julie, you would agree, like this always, when we do these episodes, no matter what the topic is, one of the keys always just seems to be about attunement and your ability as a parent, ideally, to be attuned to your kids and be aware and be sort of present and listening and watching and curious, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've said this before on the podcast, all behavior is communication. All behavior is communication. So your kids are communicating to you with anything they do, and any behavior they have. And it's about learning to interpret that behavior and be curious about that behavior so that you can kind of put it into language. Because in spite of behaviors, we are a language-based species. But, and the other thing I would say too is that, teenagers especially, tweens and teens, are not always as secretive as they're not always as successful at keeping secrets as they think they're being. Often there's a little trail of evidence for whatever you might be talking about, right? You see candy wrappers stuffed underneath the socks in the sock drawer, or you see, or you notice that every time after a meal they get up and go to the bathroom. There's often some sign, if we're paying close enough attention to, to their behavior, that they're communicating something to us about what's going on.
Right.
Yes, I think that's true.
Amy, you would agree that obviously attunement is just a big part of it, right? I guess is trying to be connected to what's going on in your house with your kids.
Yeah, it's a really big part of it. And then if you're going to address it with your kid, it's like just as Julie was saying about not chasing your kid with vegetables, not talking about the weight and the food, talking about their feelings. Like are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling sad? Is everything okay? Maybe I'm seeing some things that might indicate that you're going through something really hard.
Yeah.
As a way to open up the conversation with them. And then, because if you talk about their weight, if you talk about it can push them deeper into it.
Right.
I want to ask Julie, this just occurred to me, and this is kind of a smaller thing, but it's an interesting detail you've talked about before. And I think it's around what food parents keep in their house. And I've heard you say this in the group, like a parent might say, like, they won't stop eating the candy. I've hidden the candy. Or they go through all the chocolate. And what you've said to parents, I've heard you say this, are like, they ate a whole bag of chips. And you've said, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you've said, listen, if you're having it in the house, it's theirs to eat. Like, you can't get mad at them about eating the chocolate if you put a bag in the chocolate, even if you've hid it under the Brussels sprouts in the fridge. Like, it's not for you to say, I can't believe they did this when you're putting it in the kitchen. Can you talk a little bit about that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's important to have what I call yes foods in the house. And yes foods are, can be anything that you're okay with your child having. That doesn't mean that you should deprive them of, like, if you don't have chocolate in the house, right? You don't want that to lead to the feeling deprived of chocolate. But maybe it's just not something you buy on a regular basis. Maybe you've got,
Right.
fruit and vegetables and meat and, all of that stuff in the house. And then when they say, hey, you know what? How come there's no chocolate in the house? You can say,
Right.
putting it on the grocery list and then bring it in. But I feel like, hiding foods, locking foods up, which I've had parents do, so their child can't get to them. Hiding foods, putting them up way high on the shelves, is the equivalent to what Amy was talking about earlier, where, well, dad, that's for dad. Dad can have that, but you're not allowed to have it. And that immediately communicates to the child both deprivation, I'm trying to deprive you of something that you want, and, that's the thing that you should be seeking. Because it's special. It's on the top shelf, right? If you bring it into the house, bring it into the house. Let them have it, make it a yes food.
Yeah, kids are gonna find that. They seek out the hidden stuff. I don't know, Amy. Do you have any thoughts around that idea?
I agree. I think that, first of all, it's like, why is it hiding?
Right.
Right.
You have to ask yourself, like, why is it hiding, and what message is that sending to your kid? And then, of course, they're going to eat it. And why shouldn't they?
Right.
Yeah.
So let's just wrap up, and we kind of do this every episode. This is obviously a huge topic, but if there were a couple of things as we end, you could leave parents with to keep in mind in terms of dealing with whether it's weight or food, what would they be? And Julie, do you want to start, and then Amy?
Sure. I mean, Greg, you know me and our listeners know me well. I'm very practical. So I think what I would want our listeners to take away from this is kind of some of the do's and don'ts that we talked about, which is don't deprive your children of food. Don't chase them with food. Do kind of create this feeling that there are yes foods in the house and that all foods are created equal. Tune into your, help them tune into their bodies that, what are you hungry for? Are you hungry for something crunchy salty? Are you hungry for something crunchy sweet? Are you hungry for something soft and savory? Kind of help them tune into what they might be interested in eating. And then, to the extent that you can, put the meal out on platters so that they see food, they smell food. Even if they don't like broccoli, it's out on a platter. Somebody in the family is eating it. They smell it, they see it, they pass it from one person to another, they hear others eating it. This is an opportunity for them to get curious about, and not only eating it, they hear others eating it, but they hear others enjoying it. And
Right.
it's an opportunity for them to get a little bit curious about food. So, those are for me, kind of the do's and don'ts. Don't chase, don't deprive, help create a balanced, a feeling of balance around food, that it's all, there's no rewards in food, that it's all kind of equal, and serve family style when you can.
Yeah, and I just want to add, Amy, before you jump in, that this idea about platters, which I think is great. I also sometimes, I was thinking about our own family, is that sometimes even if it's not on platters, it's in the kitchen and the kids can come and serve themselves. This idea that they have some autonomy around their food and that they can take what they want or don't want, as opposed to you giving them their portion for the meal, just seems like, and like you said, I think that starts their own exploration of what do I want? What do I need? As opposed to you saying, this is what you get. That they can have some control over that. So, Amy, do you want to add something?
Yes, I love that. I love that. I think about eating disorders and how, like, what causes eating disorders, what leads to eating disorders. I think that there are parents, and I would say, we know who we are, right? We know which way we lean. It's like there's parents who need to be less concerned about their kids, and then there's parents who need to be more concerned about their kids.
Right.
There's like over-involved parents and under-involved parents.
Right.
Exactly. we find ourselves in the middle of that. And so I think there is something to be said about like trusting your child, like emerging into the world and through childhood and adolescence and into adulthood. It's like they're on their own journey, right? And they have their own package. They have their own body. They have their own genetics. They have their own sense of who they want to be and where they want to go. They have their own interests that might be different than ours. And really to trust them to unfold as they will, and trust that they're going to find their way. Because if we're too involved, then they feel suffocated and they don't feel like they have autonomy. If we're under involved, then they don't feel like there's like a deprivation in that, right? They don't have stability and structure and somebody who is giving them feedback about who they are. And really just fostering self-acceptance and positive self-regard as a family. And that starts with, right, like as a mom, that's between me and me first and foremost. And then it's between me and my kid, right? What I model for her, it goes so far in ways that, it's like the way that she reflects back to me who I am is sometimes like devastating, right?
Yes, of course.
Like, oh man. So I know where I have to, like, where my work is. And so just to keep all of that in mind, our kids are, and then, like we didn't even talk about this, is like the pressures that our kids feel, and, especially in the tri-state area, the pressures that our kids feel in becoming something or someone, and how much do we contribute to that versus allowing, like, following their own passions. I mean, all of these things end up in the body, right? They end up in how we feel about ourselves, and how we relate to ourselves, and helping kids with their hard feelings. I think that's so important. Being able to self-regulate, to be with difficulty, to be with challenges, to make mistakes, to learn from them, to get through hard things. It's so important.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, we touch on that idea a lot, sitting through the hard feelings. I think we did a whole episode on it. So Amy, this has been great. Thank you so much for doing this and joining us. I am curious, like, if a parent is listening to this and wants to reach out to you, maybe for some help, what is the best way to find you?
My website is abodyofbeing.com, and I can be emailed at amy@abodyofbeing.com.
So it's a body of being, all one thing.
All one word, .com.
Okay.
.com.
Okay, great.
Fabulous.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your family and friends.
And if you'd like to hear more about Julie's work, join one of her parenting groups, or see about individual counseling,
Please visit parentinghorizons.com, or you can email Julie at julie.ross@parentinghorizons.com.
See you next time.